Welcome to Just Relationships, the show that offers you concrete ways to make your relationships better. Whether it's your boss, your spouse, your children, or your friends, the quality of your relationships in life directly affects how you feel about yourself and the success you achieve. Your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer, a psychotherapist, telecoach, author, and seminar leader, will interview top experts to help you learn to manage this essential part of your life. And now, here's your host, Dr. Duffy Spencer.
Greetings to you. Well, if you heard last week, you know that this is part 2 of 3 dads and a baby. Yes, I said 3 dads and a baby. Adventures in Modern Parenting by Dr. Ian Jenkins, who is an MD specializing in internal medicine. Yet that's not what he's talking about today. He's talking about the fact that he was in love. He is in love with, Alan for 10 years. And then Alan and Ian opened up their relationship to a third person, Jeremy, almost 9 years ago. And when they first became a throuple, yes, that's the term, throuple, they definitely decided that they were discussing it. Ian and Alan were discussing it beforehand. But when a friend offered an embryo, which is much, much better than even working with an egg donor, they freeze better, actually. That was the tipping point for them. And the 3 of them decided, yes, they would in fact be parents, be co-parents. And so here we are. If you didn't hear last week's show, the good news is you can get it on podcast. If you would like to tell your friends about it, if people are interested in understanding different ways of being intimate, different kinds of family arrangements, the pros and the cons of them, and what is possible. Really, that's the question. What is possible? So welcome back, Ian Jenkins.
Thank you, Dr. Duffy. It's my pleasure.
Well, thank you. Thank you for the interview, Ian, for doing all that you did and for writing about it so that we can share it and enlighten people. So in case people did not hear the previous show, the idea of a polyamorous relationship, I was putting R in like amour, amorous relationship is very intriguing, and we do it all the time as a culture. You know, it's out there. It's been out there, as you had pointed out last week, that it's really even more the norm. Monogamy is a certain kind of norm, having to do with property rights, having to do with legalities of who the father is of the child, and let's make sure the women are loyal. So we understand that this is my child, not a bastard child, and I'm giving my name and property to. And all of that is so true, and we are very possessive as a country, as individuals. We don't share easily, and I'm talking about this culturally. And if anyone is saying, "Oh, well, I share," I'm just thinking about the difference between our frontier mentality. Even though we haven't been raised in a frontier, we have that mindset that the expression was, every man for himself, and everyone could prosper, and we had such a fertile continent to explore and exploit. It didn't matter that people already lived here. We were going to take it all because we could. And as compared to China, which had very, very rocky land, and that was not arable. And they had to literally get together in groups with pickaxes and really break those rocks up to create some sort of arable land for farming. So from the very beginning, China, for the yay or nay, had a more collective mentality. We have an individualistic mentality. So we are possessive of each other. And even though you talked about last week the concept of we all help each other and we have breaks, and when we think about two parents trying to raise a family, and the nuclear family is not well supported in America at all. We expect the nuclear family to do all the child rearing and all the economic responsibilities. And how can people be inside of the home and outside of the home at the same time? Of course, the epidemic has caused so much remote or virtual working, but the nuclear family is really not helped, and it's on its own to struggle with all of these conflicts. And then you add, an extended family model where there's plenty of shared. And in this case, it is the proverbial triangle. And I will say, as a social psychologist and a psychotherapist, that triangles are a part of, and triangulation is a part of dysfunction. That it's, A talks to B about C and C talks to A about B, and they can be very, very off-putting. And in sociology, we look at the fact that the triad, just the number 3, whether it's co-business owners or co-parents, has a particularly distinct quality of 2 against 1. Now, that 2 can rotate, but there is in the triangle itself that particular dynamic. So I am just wondering about that idea of 3 people in love as a throuple, how you manage that.
Well, excellent question. So, any polyamorous relationship, I think you have to attend to the fact that people might short-term or long-term have stronger feelings for one person or might have different relationships. For us, one of the things that happened is Alan and I were already established in the primary bedroom of the house. When Jeremy moved in, he actually didn't want to displace or join us there, so he kind of moved into what was a guest room. But we wanted to avoid any sense of the idea that he was like an extra or not an equal member of the family. This was also true with like finances. We wanted to make sure that, those were joined so that there wasn't anything about like people contributing less or more. It was all community property. So we did try to make very careful, progress towards an understanding we were all equal. And I actually reached out to Jeremy and said, listen, I can move down to that other room. We could rotate so that it's clear that we're all equal here. And he's like, I actually like my little getaway sometimes. But in truth, we all rotate down to that room for sleeping just because we take turns watching our littlest. And that depends on our work schedules. As far as the 2 against 1 situation, we do experience that, but it's actually in a positive way. So, if 2 people are fighting, it's frequently a he said, she said situation. Sometimes the genders are the same. With us, people might have an issue and there might be 2 voices on one side and 1 on the other side. And there's a reason why judicial panels are always odd numbered. It's because there's no ties. And so if I'm, having a discussion about something, we want to consider doing with a kid or not do as a family, and my 2 partners say, hey, this is how we feel about this, we have an understanding. We will say, look, it sounds like I'm in the wrong about this. I think I have a point of view and I'm not crazy, but I'm willing to listen to that and understand that, yours may be the better perspective here. So for us, it's actually kind of helpful. And if 2 of us have any friction, a third person can come in and be a little objective and say, hey, you know what, like actually you're being the crazy one here. Why don't you apologize and we can move forward. So for us, it's been a benefit, much, much, much more than any kind of a hindrance.
Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant, Ian Jenkins. So the concept of groupthink certainly applies less if there's an odd number.
I'm not sure, I guess, how to relate the concept of groupthink to that. When I think of groupthink, I think about like a mob or something. That's what we're saying most about groupthink. But we try to be the most deliberate parents that have ever come around. And I guess that's just how we had to approach it. As you mentioned on the last show, there was a lot of work involved in getting these kids. They didn't happen by accident, and we have done everything with intention to make sure they have the best possible childhoods and grow into, healthy, independent adults. So we approach everything that way. Like, think about it. Let's make the best decision. Let's not rush. Is this the right thing for the family, and move ahead?
The family, right. The family being the criterion, the family. And as a psychotherapist who works with individuals and couples, it's, we look at the relationship. What is the good for the relationship? Not, what is good for you? What is good for me? And the third entity, the relationship. What is good for the relationship? So that kind of mindset of expansion and openness and getting off ego and getting off this extreme individualism that we talked about last time. So you three are really exemplary. I'm like trying to make sense of you, because how you each got so functional and so progressive and so sharing and open and non-possessive and generous. What a lucky thing that you three found each other this way.
Yeah, I mean, definitely. I feel really lucky, and I know well, not all, but tons of my gay friends are trying to find a great guy, and I feel a little bit bad for taking two for myself.
Well, you certainly found the two, and it's a wonderful match. And I know you've done so many interviews, Ian Jenkins. And so tell me, is there anything that I am not asking that I could ask? Is there a downside to this? Everything I'm hearing is so wonderful.
I mean, there are some downsides. The more people there are, the more chances there are for a heartbreak. Somebody could get sick, somebody could leave. Those things happen. It's more likely if you have more than one partner. I will say, though, that there's also resilience in that. So if I were to get killed on the road later today, my partners still have each other. And I take comfort in that. My kids would still have two parents. Like, that's actually a great thing for me. So when everyone's like, oh, this is only going to end badly, there's more chances for a breakup. That's true, but there's also more chances for resilience. And so for me, that's worth considering. We never say like, oh, you should only have one kid, because if you have two, that'll double the chances that they'll get sick. Nobody ever says that. So that's worth considering as people sort of ponder the risk to the kids. For me, the biggest downside to any of this has been, it's been a little bit stressful having the publicity for my family, that it's not something we're accustomed to. We're not the kind of people who are like posting pictures of our food on Facebook because we think everyone should look at us. But we did want to share this story. There are several reasons for it. And I think one of them actually evolved after the book was written. It's been a terrible year. People have been alone. They've lost loved ones. Businesses have collapsed. People have been struggling to make ends meet. There's been a lot of acrimony in our political system. And it's kind of nice to have a story out there where people get together and want a beautiful family, and it works out, and we love each other, and we have wonderful kids. Like, it's a feel-good story. So for me, that's the biggest thing this year. But we also wanted poly families to get a little bit more visibility, and for poly families to know that there may be legal protections for them, because those are actually really important. We didn't do this to make a point. We did this to protect our children. So, getting that extra parentage for us was really to protect our child's emotional and financial well-being.
Yes. And I'm just thinking about the norm, or the stated norm in American life, of the dyad, the group of two that are the intimate partners. And again, going back to sociology, whereas the triad is always this two and one phenomenon, the dyad is the most fragile group, because if one leaves, there is no more group. And as you said, with the triad, one leaves and you still have a group. So the triad is less fragile than the dyad. And in a dyad, everything is exacerbated because the collaboration of the two needs to be so strong to hold that groupmanship. And so that is our norm in America. And as you also pointed out in your book, the idea of the very high divorce rate, over half of marriages do dissolve. And again, the whole idea of secrecy, which you don't have. And I just wanted to make mention, because if people didn't hear the first show, that we looked at the concept of secrecy, and we also looked at the concept of volunteerism, and how many polygamists, where there's official marriage relationships, are exploitive, really of females. I don't know of any women who've had harems. Maybe they have. But the whole idea of property, patrilineal property, patriarchal property, and you guys have none of that. So it's a new version of the extended family. And you two actually can actually be a model for polyfamilies. And do you think that's on the rise? Do you think more and more people will go into a kind of an extended family arrangement where there is sexual involvement?
Again, so I think polyamory is about love. So there's not necessarily sexual activity in that. There are relationships that are open for outside sexual encounters. And interestingly, some people have a rule, like you can sleep with other people, but we don't want you to fall in love, because that's where they experience their jealousy. But yeah, polyamory is about a loving relationship. You can imagine someone falls in love with someone who's no longer sexually active, or really, there's actually even non-sexual polyamorous families where people just like, I love this person platonically, and they might invite them into their house and live with them because, again, this idea that, people who live together have to be either parents, children, the parents are in a sexual relationship. That's not necessarily true. I mean, great friends could live together if they wanted to. We could all be like Frog and Toad from the children's books, where just great friends have a long-term relationship. There's no reason why that can't be the case. So for me, polyamory is a lot broader than sexuality relationships. We certainly, are focused on many other things, especially our children right now, to be honest. But yeah, I think it is on the rise because there's more awareness of it. And like when I was a kid, and my first long-term relationship ended, I had been together for 6 years with the first boy that I ever kissed. I was the first person that he ever kissed. And, at the end of that, he basically realized he needed to date other people. He had never kissed anyone else. He didn't think he could be lifelong monogamous. He wanted to experience that. And I was completely understanding of that. I wasn't excited to see him go. I was deeply hurt, but I knew he wasn't doing it on purpose. For me, I said, listen, my job is to support you. I'm your partner. And so I helped him move on. I gave him permission. I helped him write dating website profiles because I wanted him to be happy. And even though it was hard, that's what I chose to do. I realized only years later, we didn't necessarily have to end our relationship. Nobody ever told me that. I didn't see a role model for that. But, it's possible to just have another relationship. I mean, maybe we could have all found someone back then. Maybe it would have been just someone that he had a relationship with. Maybe that wouldn't have worked out, but it was an option. We just didn't know about it. So now more young people know about it.
Now more young people know about it. Yes. And historically, gay couples have had more open sexual relationships. When we're looking at gay as opposed to lesbian, males historically, the difference between the sex drive for the genders, that for boys their penis is just there and it's a part of their lives, and for girls they need a mirror, and female sexuality and male sexuality are very different. That's one major reason. So you have the male sex drive as opposed to the female. That's one thing. And then you have the fact that gay relationships have not been sanctioned by society. So there was no support for the union, and not even a sense of getting married, that you even could get married. And so for those reasons, we have tend to be more open in gay relationships that are intimate than heterosexual relationships. So you have that, and then you have this other piece of the three of us are living together and we're raising two magnificent children together. So did you want to speak to that at all, the sense of less possessiveness to begin with gay couples, the male sex drive, and then the stigma of being gay?
I wouldn't really count myself as an expert on, human sexuality in general. I think that I do see just in my own life that there are more open, or at least publicly open, same-sex relationships than opposite sex relationships. But it's not universal. There are lots of sex drive mismatches in pairs. And sometimes it's the female who needs more attention than the man is interested in providing. I think as a generalization, it's probably fair to say that, men seem to desire more partners in America. That might be because of how we're acculturated. There's this idea that if a guy sleeps around in college, he's a stud, right? And if a woman does that, then she's a slut. And that's a really harmful framework. It's harmful to men. That teaches them to conquer. It's harmful for women. It teaches them that sexuality is bad, or that their intimacy or their pleasure is wrong to seek. So for me, I think we should focus on, just accepting each other, whatever someone's sex drive or level of interest in an additional partner is okay for them. The key thing is that we treat each other with respect and that we go about our lives safely and honestly.
Yes. I really do agree with you. And I do think that with here's again, speaking as a sociologist, social psychologist, which is the marriage of the psychology and the sociology, that there are so many more women than men later in years, with men having a shorter lifespan. And how often I have said that women should get together and live together, whether it's sexual or not sexual. The whole idea of sharing, of why, as a woman, when I see women my age who are competing for this one man, 20 women competing for this one man who they wouldn't even have looked at when they were younger, but now he's the only game in town. So look at all these fabulous women around you, and you're just fixated on this one man. I don't get it. But then again, there's so much to deal with in terms of tradition and enculturation. So you look like you have some thoughts on that.
I agree. I think it's like if people could live together in communities and share more resources and properties and relationships, we would all be happier and fewer people would be alone, which I think is maybe the worst outcome late in life.
Yeah.
We also talk about just what men and women bring to society. I want more women to vote and vote their interests and end up running this country. I think it would be a better country if they did. And people sometimes look at our relationship and say it's harmful to the kids because the kids lack a mother. There's been some conservative sites that have said this isn't biblical, or that, we've tore the baby away from the mother was actually one of the things that was said. Well, the truth is, the egg donor mom wanted to have children, but wasn't in a position to have them. And so everything has worked out for all of us. She has 2 kids now that she wouldn't otherwise have had. And it's true that she doesn't usually live with us, but she frequently does. She visits, and we had her here for 2 months just a couple of weeks ago. And so she also has made a YouTube channel where she reads books to the kids every night, and she's a huge part of our lives. And so when people say that to me, I'm like, well, she is part of our lives. They do have a mother figure. So I guess you're okay with it now. And you know what, Dr. Duffy? They're not satisfied for some reason. And I asked them too, so you're saying that if there's a heterosexual couple and the woman dies in childbirth, the husband has to give the baby away because that baby deserves a mother and a father? Is that what you're saying? And of course, that's different somehow. So what they're really talking about is it just makes them uncomfortable, or it seems outside of their cultural tradition or their religious views. It has nothing to do with the child welfare because the logic isn't there. Our kids have 3 dads, and they have an involved mom and 2 involved surrogates and tons of women in their lives who love and adore them and spend tons of time with them. So they are actually, if anything, at risk of being spoiled rather than deprived.
so many people who love Piper and Parker, and I imagine that knowing you as I do from these two interviews, that you were open from the very beginning, even explaining to the children before they knew what the words meant, so that they're aware and they will have a much easier time explaining. We only have a couple of minutes left, but the fact that the children will say, yeah, I have 3 dads. And what is it? One dad, one papa, one, how do you distinguish that?
Yeah, I'm Papa.
You're Papa. And then there's Dad. And what's the third? Is there a?
Daddy.
Daddy. Oh, Dad, Daddy, and Papa. So the children will learn to say, yeah, I have 3 dads, 3 fathers. And the idea of the donor mom being a huge part of the life is also so wonderful. So
it's great. Yeah. And there's absolutely no confusion. Some people are like, well, how can the kids understand this? It's what they know. Piper has actually known having 3 parents. If anything, she finds it sad that her friends only have 2. And just like all of us recognized a single parent family or divorced and remarried families when we were growing up, and we had no confusion about what that meant, the kids have no confusion. We have told her the whole story. We took a little bit of Daddy and a little bit of Mama Megan, and we put that in our surrogate Delilah, and she took care of you until you were big enough to be on your own. And then you came out of her, and we all love you. And she knows everything that happened, and will continue to know everything that happened in more detail as her brain develops.
Yeah. So Mama Megan, so absolutely beautiful. And we do have to close, Ian Jenkins, and I want everyone to know, and you are helping people with polyamorous families and teaching a different way of being that could be very, very beneficial for all. 3 Dads and a Baby, Adventures in Modern Parenting by Ian Jenkins, MD. And so you can get it online anywhere. It's also available as an ebook. So thank you so much, Ian. I so appreciate the interviews. And I wish you and everyone in your family much happiness and love. And thank you. Thank you for being so brave and courageous and getting out there with something that is mostly stigmatized. And but we're looking at differences here that maybe we can open our minds and our hearts to other ways of being in the world.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was a pleasure chatting.
Thank you, Ian. And wishing all of you great relationships.